The sky over Avdiivka was torn apart by the ear-piercing screech of artillery shells and the suffocatingly thick scent of gunpowder. Amidst that coordinate of death, a lone M2 Bradley infantry fighting vehicle was being besieged by the steel pincers of an entire powerful Russian brigade. The scenario of a pile of Ukrainian scrap metal seemed to have been decided from the very first minute. But no, instead of falling, the world watched in shock as a horrifying sight unfolded. Modern Russian BTR-82 as exploded one after another in succession, turning into blazing fireballs under the barrel of the Bushmaster cannon. Why could a machine from the ADS dominate the battlefield against overwhelming numbers and dense artillery fire? Forget about those operational maps with giant arrows. This battle proves a grim truth. In modern warfare, the side with greater numbers is not necessarily the victor. Rather, the one who is faster and sees more clearly is the survivor. To understand why the pride of Russian armor fell so easily, we need to dissect the fatal mistakes in their operational thinking. Look at the footage recorded from drones in the skies above Avdiivka. It was not a genuine military operation. It was a suicide rehearsal orchestrated by arrogance and systemic errors. Russian BTR-82 has advanced into the battlefield in straight lines, flaunting their steel might with pride, yet also with utter naivety across the open terrain. This was not merely a technical error, but the collapse of an obsolete linear tactical mindset, where armored units were operated like soulless chess pieces on a chessboard from the previous century. Was it overconfidence, or rather the extreme rigidity of a command apparatus that permitted no flexibility on the ground, in the midst of a flat and transparent battlefield, where every meter of ground is monitored by drone god eyes, marching in close formation without the cover of smoke screens, or effective electronic warfare systems, is an act of collective suicide. The attackers seemed to be trapped in delusional rosy reports of firepower superiority. They believed that the raw muscle of conventional armored brigades could crush the opponent's defensive will through sheer numbers. But the grim reality dealt a painful blow. Numerical superiority only becomes a burden when lacking the sophistication of combined arms coordination. Russian crews rushed into coordinates of death, completely unaware that they had been target-locked from tree lines kilometers away. This complacency not only incinerated multi-million-dollar machines, but also threw soldiers into an inescapable meat grinder, where their sacrifice was exchanged only for worthless, scorched square meters of land. Even more noteworthy is the helplessness of the Russian artillery giant. Yes, they possess thousands of gun barrels ready to fire, but it is a giant that is blind. Russian artillery reacts quickly, yet it is always slower than the suffocating pulse of the modern battlefield. They rain down firestorms on old coordinates, positions that the Ukrainian army had long since vacated for redeployment. Why is there this fatal mismatch? Because reconnaissance information from Russian drone units must pass through a command hierarchy process that is too cumbersome and outdated. From the drone signal to the brigade command post, through intermediate staff levels before reaching the artillery positions. While officers are still fumbling with operational maps and signing off on orders, the target has long since vanished. A bulky, heavy command apparatus has stripped away the final chance of survival for the very vanguard armored units, exposing themselves to the enemy's guns. While the attackers are still fumbling with operational diagrams from the last century, the Ukrainian army has already laid out a high-tech death network, ready to turn the pride of Russian armor into target practice in a meticulously arranged engagement. As the Russian steel pincers advanced, they had no idea they were entering a deadly maze, calculated down to the last millimeter. Ukraine no longer operates the war in a fight-to-the-death manner within damp trenches until the final breath. At Avdiivka, they have elevated military art to a new level, active defense. Instead of viewing the terrain as a fixed obstacle, Ukrainian commanders transformed this entire area into a variable zone, a living entity capable of navigating, fragmenting, and exhausting the opponent's strength before delivering the finishing blow. The heart of this network is a seamless reconnaissance strike ecosystem. From above, drone god eyes wove through the smoke of gunfire, observing every breath of the Russian artillery with a coldness that bordered on ruthless. This is not just about seeing the enemy. It is the ability to read the game. Ukrainian drone control teams do more than just report positions. They analyze the reloading patterns of enemy artillery, finding precious time windows when Russian gun barrels are pausing or shifting targets. It is precisely during those brief moments that the order to sortie is issued. The M2 Bradley, the sharp blade of the Ukrainian army, rushes out from its hiding place like a ghost, ready to perform its tactical surgical mission. Let's talk about the weapon that has become a nightmare for Russian light armor, the 25mm M242 Bushmaster autocannon. With incredible precision at medium range, the Bradley does not need lucky shots. It carves up Russian infantry and light armored units as soon as they emerge from the tree lines. The extremely high rate of fire, combined with armor-piercing, fin-stabilized discarding Sabo APF SDS rounds, allows the Bradley to neutralize a BTR-82A in just a few short seconds before the enemy crew can even understand. What is happening? The Bradley's barrel stabilization capability while moving is a completely overwhelming advantage over Russian armored vehicles, which must stop or slow down to fire accurately. The Bradley at Avdiivka is not just a combat vehicle. It is a mobile heavy sniper that knows how to make the most of the enemy's moments of vulnerability. However, the most terrifying aspect lies not in the vehicle itself, but in the cunning, multi-layered coordination. This is a symphony of death, harmoniously coordinated. When a Russian convoy falls into sight, kamikaze FPV first-person view drones play the role of the interceptor. They target the lead vehicle, or the engineer vehicles clearing the way, creating a wreckage that blocks the path and turning the entire column into sitting ducks stuck on the march. At that very moment, the Bradley will appear from an unexpected direction, pouring horrific firepower into the flank of the enemy formation. And from behind, at a safe distance that Russian tank guns can hardly reach, M1 Abrams are quietly observing through advanced thermal optics. If any Russian main battle tank intends to intervene, the Abrams will throw heavy steel punches to finish the match from afar. Ukraine has created a no-way-in, no-way-out battlefield situation where Russian troops cannot advance because they encounter FPVs and Bradleys, and cannot retreat because the escape route has been locked down by artillery beforehand. Is there any coincidence here? No. It is the result of mastering technology and combined arms coordination at the highest level. The Ukrainian army has turned Avdiivka into a laboratory of modern warfare, where artificial intelligence, drones, and flexible tactical minds are together, breaking massive but slow steel fists. The terrifying silence of the tree lines in Avdiivka is not peace. It is the waiting of a closing trap. Such is the theory of a perfect defensive system, but the reality of the battlefield, at the moment of close-quarters combat when steel pierces flesh, when Bradley firepower confronts an entire Russian brigade head-on, is many times more horrific and suffocating. Take a deep breath, because what happened next on the ground in Avdiivka is not for the faint of heart. These were no longer soulless arrows on a military map, but a brutal mechanized close-quarters combat, where the boundary between life and death was as thin as a layer of cold-rolled steel. The early mist was torn apart by the roar of diesel engines and the sound of iron tracks grinding against the scorched earth. Two Russian BTR-82As, utilizing maximum speed, charged frantically down the trail with the hope of using kinetic energy to pierce through Ukraine's outer defensive lines. In the old operational mindset, speed is life. But at this coordinate of death, speed was exactly the death sentence. From the desolate tree lines, the Ukrainian M2A2 Bradley loomed, appearing like a ghost stepping out from the inferno. Without any hesitation, the 25mm Bushmaster barrel began to spit fire. That sound was not a boom like a tank cannon, but it sowed a dense, suffocating horror. It was the sewing machine of death, stitching threads of steel through the BTR's hull. At close range, the Bradley's subcaliber rounds did not bounce. They slammed straight into the thin armor of the BTR-82A, turning the vehicle's compartment into a furnace full of shrapnel. The leading BTR lurched to a halt, black smoke billowing out before flames erupted from within, turning it into a massive torch in the middle of the clearing. The next scene was truly an earthly nightmare. Russian infantry sitting on the roof, a risky tank descent tactic, were thrown from the vehicle by the pressure of explosions and precise streams of fire. They fell to the ground, disoriented, isolated, amidst a web of interlacing gunfire. In that moment, a soldier's bravery no longer held meaning against a weapons system designed to destroy targets with maximum efficiency. Efforts to find cover behind burning wreckage only made the targets clearer on the Bradley's thermal sights. But war is never one-sided. While the Bradley was dominating the engagement, an RPG round or perhaps a shell from a Russian support unit struck the Bradley's hull. A loud explosion rang out. Dust and shrapnel enveloped the American machine. In a typical scenario with old Soviet-era armored vehicles, that would likely have been the end for the crew. However, this was when the value of NATO design spoke up. Instead of abandoning the vehicle in a panic, the Ukrainian Bradley crew, protected by composite armor and smart shock absorption design, held firm. The Bradley reversed, deploying a dense smokescreen to blind the opponent, while the fire control system continued to operate resiliently. And then, a testament to the superb discipline and cohesion of the Ukrainian army, appeared a second Bradley, from the reserve unit, charged straight into the fire. Not to retreat, but to protect its comrade. It fired frantically at suspected enemy positions, creating an impenetrable wall of fire so the damaged Bradley could withdraw safely. This coordination was not just a skill. It was absolute trust in one another, amidst the hail of bullets. A spiritual strength that no human wave brigade could replicate. The Russian side, realizing the first wave was broken, threw more BMP units and reserve infantry into the fight to overwhelm with flesh. They hoped that by accepting high losses they could exhaust the Bradley crew's ammunition or overwhelm them mentally. But every human wave that charged up was ruthlessly broken. Why? Because above, kamikaze FPV drones were waiting. Just as the Russian infantry managed to regroup behind the husks of burned armored vehicles, small drones carrying explosives dove down with centimeter-level precision. The psychological collapse of the Russian soldiers began here. They saw their most modern equipment blow up, saw comrades perish without even having time to see the enemy's face. The feeling of being hunted by an invisible force, of every movement being observed from above, caused all offensive will to vanish, giving way to chaotic survival instincts. The surviving Russian soldiers fled in vain, leaving behind a battlefield cluttered with scrap metal and the terrifying silence of death. This battle is not just a highlight clip attracting millions of views on social media. It is a costly lesson written in blood about the change in warfare methods. It shows that when reconnaissance technology combines with precision firepower and a spirit of discipline, overwhelming numerical figures on paper remain just meaningless numbers. The battle at Avdiivka ended in fire and smoke, but its aftershocks are spreading throughout military academies worldwide. It is not just a local victory, but a herald for a new chapter, harsh and volatile, in global military history. The battle at Avdiivka was not merely a sporadic firefight between motorized vehicles. It is an ironclad testament to a revolution in military doctrine. The strategic lesson drawn from the wreckage of the Russian Brigade is very clear: control over tempo and information is now more important than control over territory. A small, flexible unit armed with a high-tech ecosystem is capable of completely neutralizing a bulky army, even if the opponent possesses overwhelming advantages in numbers or conventional artillery firepower. Forecasters predict that in the future, the war in Donetsk will no longer have room for large-scale 20th-century-style steel punches. Instead, it is transforming into a step-by-step attrition war. In this life-or-death chessboard, whoever adapts faster to the drone explosion and masters the electronic warfare spectrum will dominate the game. Conversely, slow, disconnected units will remain nothing more than mobile targets in the opponent's crosshairs. The biggest question posed after this battle is, will giant tanks and conventional armored brigades still have a place on the modern battlefield? Or are we truly witnessing the demise of the era of traditional armor, an era in which steel and quantity must give way to algorithms and information processing speeds? What do you think about the Bradley's performance at Avdiivka? Is this the end for the overwhelming with flesh mindset in modern warfare? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Don't forget to press like and subscribe so you don't miss the most in-depth and dramatic military analyses. See you all in the next reports.